I have them. This meeting is being recorded, number one. I want to make sure you all know that. So the nice thing, one of the silver linings about having Zoom classes is that we are able to record all of the classes. If you miss one, then you can just email us and request a copy, and we'll be happy to send you a link to the recording. So you can keep that in mind. And my name is Megan Wilden. I have the honor of being the Executive Director of Allyn, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Berkshire Community College. And we are delighted to be here today with Naomi Spatz and Nancy Vale. They are two members of Allyn's Performing Arts Initiative Committee, and they have organized an amazing array of classes, special events, theater parties, and they also have a Allyn play reading shared interest group, which is free and open to all Allyn members. And they had their first successful Zoom meeting just last week, and you were reading Chekhov, right? I can't remember which play.
Uncle Vanya.
Yeah, yes, yeah, and it looked terrific. Naomi Spatz is the co-founder of New York's Golden Squirrel Theater. She created Teacher's Night on Broadway and Kids Day on Broadway. The arts run in her family, as she is married to playwright and also Allyn instructor Stephen Somkin. So thank you, Naomi, for being here today. Our other moderator is Nancy Vale. Nancy holds an MFA from Northwestern University, where she taught acting. She is involved in a wide variety of theater programs in the New York metropolitan area and has appeared in local theater productions and has also taught a number of wonderful classes for Allyn. And I encourage everyone to pester her to teach more. How about that, Nancy? So as mentioned before, this class is in the webinar format, which means that attendees are not visible. Your video is not on and your microphone is not on, so feel free to relax, come in your pajamas, eat your breakfast. It's okay if your dog barks and so forth. And this allows the focus to be on the conversation that we'll be having shortly. There will be lots of time for questions and answers and discussion. We will be using the chat function for that. You can just write a message either to all panelists or all panelists and attendees. It can be while they're just talking. And then at a certain point, we will stop and I will read the questions that appear on the chat for further discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to turn over this class to Naomi and Nancy, who will be introducing our speakers today.
Thank you all for coming. We're looking forward to hearing the conversations. I'd like to introduce Gloria Miller first. Gloria was a co-founder of the Allyn Theater Company, which she did with her husband, who is sitting next to her, Macey Levin. But she also has been a director, and she directed such plays. I'm going to read them all in case you know them, and then you can understand where she comes from. Dear Liar, The Guest Lecturer, The American Dream, Duck Variations, Daisy in the Dreamtime, and she co-directed Sin. She's also served as a costume designer, stage manager. She moderated Friday afternoon discussions at the Berkshire Theatre Group, where you might have seen her, during the summer seasons. And she also has written a play, her play Adjustments, a gentle comedy for cynical times, and it was written with another Allyn board member, Allyn Tettenbaum, and she has had a reading at the Berkshire Theatre Group. Currently, she is a reviewer for curtainup.com, or maybe not currently because there's little to review, but we welcome her and thank her for her presence. And she's also, as we just learned, an amazing gardener, cook, and kind person. Thank you.
Hysterical.
Nancy, you must unmute.
I thought we were out of, yeah. Okay, now you can hear me. Gloria is also the other half, as they used to say in the good old days, of Macey Levin, who is sitting right next to her this morning. He is a co-founder, or was a co-founder of the Allyn Theater and its artistic director. He's had an extensive career as an actor, director, artist, artistic director, teacher, lecturer, and on, and particularly a reviewer. And I'm sure we've all read his and enjoyed his reviews. As a director, he staged over 150 productions, including children's theater and musicals, Shakespeare, improvisational performances, and many other dramas. He's lectured and conducted workshops at C.W. Post, at Southampton College, at Hofstra, Columbia, and at the Elder Hostels. His reviews appear in the Lakeville Journal's Compass, and you can read him online at www.Berkshire's On Stage when we are back to normal times. Thank you.
And now I would like to introduce the artistic director of the day, Macey and Gloria will be interviewing and conversing with. And it's Allyn Burrows, artistic director of Shakespeare and Company. And while everybody knows him, his bio goes on and on because his background is really vast as an actor, a director, and stage, television, and soon movies, right? But we have a bit of time, so I'd like to read some of his bio because it's so impressive that I think you should know. So this is his 4th year as artistic director at Shakespeare. He was an artistic associate at Shakespeare for several years and acted in numerous productions, including King John, Much Ado About Nothing, Henry, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Henry IV, Part 1, Measure for Measure, Betrayal, The House of Mirth, Love's Labor Lost, Macbeth, and the complete works of Shakespeare. Before that, he was the artistic director of Actors Shakespeare Project in Boston for 7 years. And his directing credits there include Romeo and Juliet, Pericles, John Lipsky's Living in Exile, Richard II, The Tempest. It goes on through the whole body of Shakespeare works. And then he was also, so he's directed, and then he also was acting recently in Boston in Can You Forgive Her at Huntington Theater, Breaking the Code, Underground Railway. He's at Homecoming at Merrimack. He is the 2006 Elliot Norton Award recipient for Homecoming, King Lear, 5x10. I don't know where, and he's also been on television, a number of things. Anyway, it goes on, and we're really privileged and honored that he came and settled with us in the Berkshires to take over Shakespeare and Company. And he's a neighbor of mine, and he's out there working because cholera and everything has taken away his baby in the stages. But he's forever thinking of new ideas, and it will come up today in the interview. So thank you very much again, Allyn, for being here and for your wonderful past.
Thank you all.
Before the curtain goes up officially, I'd like to give a little preview of what you all, audience, because I think we're here in the theater. In my mind, we're in a theater right now, which I'm longing to be in. We have coming up next week, you'll be hearing Julianne Boyd and Peter Bergman in a conversation. That would be on June 12th. The following Friday, Kate McGuire and Barbara Waldinger, critic, will be having discussion with us. And finally, on the last week, we'll have Daniel Elihu Kramer and Jeffrey Borak, who I hope has gotten his computer to behave, and they'll join us on June 26th. So now the curtain's up, and we turn it over to our guests.
So
Can
good
I?
morning.
Yeah, there you are.
Are we on?
Are we on?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we can't see anything.
But that doesn't matter. We can talk.
Okay.
Okay, Allyn, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We have met in the past, and I know something about your background, and Naomi just gave us some more. Could you go into a bit more detail in how you became a theater maven? And was it sort of something you sort of moved into, or was it like a bolt of lightning?
It really was by default. I'd always acted. I was the youngest of six. And if you go into any green room in any theater that's full and you take a poll, generally 80% of the people in that room will be the youngest in their family.
It's true.
Yeah.
It just absolutely happens. So, so for me, I was always acting. I was always on stage in the summertime. I acted in school growing up, but in college, it wasn't my primary pursuit. My plan was to go into the Foreign Service. I majored in international relations, French literature. I went to college in France for a little while. I went to high school in France also for a year. And the theater was just something that I was just part of my bloodstream. It was part of my makeup. It was something that I did for enjoyment and, a sense of community, really. And then I was about to graduate from Boston University, and I'd been taking a lot theater there, doing a lot of theater there. And my advisor said to me, look, you have got to get, before you embark on this career as in the Foreign Service, you have got to get this theater bug out of your system. So just go, just see if you can work it through. And I never did. I moved to New York. I lived in New York for 18 years. I was on the regional circuit for many years, then came back working off Broadway, hooked up with a lot of young playwrights in New York. We did a lot of late night theater in way downtown New York. And I'm still trying to get it out of my system. I can't seem to shake it. I leave it. Every time I plan on getting out of the industry, it's like Al Pacino. It just keeps pulling me back in. So I'm all the better for it, really. But it does give me my background in international relations. It's still with me. It's still forces me to look at everything through the viewpoint of the worldview. And what is the effect on the environment? What do we want to say with theater out in the world? What are we putting out into the ether? And that's kind of the angle that I always find myself taking, particular avenue. As we choose plays or directors or actors, what is the conversation that we're having?
Yeah. Yeah, and also in your ability to run a business, which is called show business. And if you don't have common sense, the ability, tact, being able to deal with people, you don't have all those talents, how do you keep a company going, afloat? So that's a very powerful tool.
Gloria, you're spot on. I mean, if you ask, my dad used to say to me, that 84% of your life is going to be administrative, whether you like it or not, and that's true. And I think people think that actors operate entirely on the creative side of the brain, but they have to, in order to get traction, to get their foot in the door, they have to have a strategic and a business sense about how to keep going. And people don't know that about a lot of actors, is that they really are. They are business people. They're self-employed business people.
That's right. That's right. And dealing with, I'm sorry, I'm going to say one more thing, but dealing with casts and directors and every other thing, you have to be able to have those people skills. And without them, you're not going to go far, no matter how creative you are. So
yeah, I did take a course in psychology in college. I did not do well, and I'm paying for it ever since. I put a lot of emphasis on everyone leaning in and the collective energy of any given endeavor, because it really, that's how one succeeds, right? I'm more interested in the group of individuals than maybe anyone's own particular.
Right.
So Gloria and I ran a small theater company, Aglet, and at times, and it was so small, you could hardly see it sometimes in comparison to you guys. But at times it was overwhelming. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with all that you have to do?
there's a lot that comes, there's a lot of water that can come over the bow, and you want to give due attention to everyone, every conversation, everyone's needs, and you have to just make sure that you keep your eye on the task and keep moving things forward. So I find that when I feel overwhelmed, the physical version of it is, let's walk and talk. Walk with me while, talk to me while we walk, and that way there's a general momentum so that we're all moving forward. That I like to say, Macey, that no theater company is too small. I keep my own theater company in my pocket that I've had for years called Riverbank Rep. And, I produced in New York with it, and I pull it out occasionally when I have to really kind of protect the creative endeavor or the inner stuff. I'm like, well, I'm going to produce that through Riverbank Rep then,
So, do you feel a release when you're on stage or you're directing something as opposed to all the business stuff? Is it much more, what's the word I want? Fulfilling.
Yeah, it's different because, of course, it uses a different part of your brain. The best day, and of course, I like to say in the theater business, as you know, the best day is the day you get offered the job, and then it's all downhill from there. Then you have to come up to the job. But Tina Packer directed. I hired her several times at my old company in Boston at Actors Shakespeare Project, and one of the most recent ones, I asked her to direct Henry VIII for us. And on the first day of rehearsal, I said, I'm shutting this door, and I'm not going to think about anything else but this play until I leave this room. And it's the split focus that can throw you off balance occasionally, because those people who say that they multitask, it's been proven they're kidding you. You can only focus on one thing at a time, and I find that directing is it's a wonderful journey to tell these stories with the cast and let them run with it and try to stay out of the way. And I find as an actor, at the end of the day, the most important thing about acting is listening. And, if I'm up there, just, listening to all my fellow actors tell their stories. So, it's a wonderful indulgence on both ends. The business side, you have so many opportunities, for missteps. I like to say in the theater, especially on the business end of things, you have to make the right decisions, and you have to make them fast. You have to make them fast, and they have to be right. And in the theater room, in the theater itself, the physical theater, I like to say there's no right or wrong. There's just good or bad. So off you go. So that's the division of the mindset, I guess.
So how fast did you have to act when this pandemic's ugly head reared itself? What was what happened there? Did you all just sit down immediately, or was it a waiting?
That's a very interesting point, Gloria, because we were actually away when things really started to heat up and lock down. We were visiting my wife's parents down in Florida. And I actually, I closed the office from Florida because I had given people the option to work from home. And it was optional. And so it was a little loose. And finally, things got, serious enough where I was like, you know what? We're shutting her down. Everyone's got to go home. So don't come in, and we have to isolate. And then we all, just started meeting each other virtually. Some days I can't tell now whether I've been talking to someone virtually or in person anyway, I'll run into someone. I just saw you. It's like, no, you haven't seen me for months. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah, it's true. So we had to, listening to the way things were rolling out by way of the advice from the experts, we had to make a call. And I like to say to people, you know, if they said, wow, you're making that call to postpone the whole season. I didn't want to dismantle the season. I wanted to postpone it. We put a lot of work into it. You know, I checked with Christopher Lloyd, who was set to play King Lear. I said, would you be on for next year? He said, well, I'm getting frailer. And I'm like, perfect. You know what I mean? If we have to, we'll have someone else carry Cordelia, you know? So, because I did Lear with Alvin Epstein. I played Kent to Alvin Epstein's Lear. And, you know, and we arranged it so that Kent would carry Cordelia in at the end, and Lear just kind of circled me, and he, you know, we'd get off stage and Alvin would say, well, that went pretty well. And he said, and I'd always wanted to say, easy for you to say, you didn't carry Cordelia in. You know, but you know, so once that, you know, kind of was set in place that I could move the season to next year, and we'll do our very best to keep as much of it as intact, then we pulled up the drawbridge, and, you know, we said, look, let's button it up and see what happens. But for now, at the time I said, look, I want to be wrong.
Yeah.
I want to be wrong about this decision, because if we get daylight on this and all of a sudden the restrictions are lifted, I want to be the one saying, great. Yeah, I was overly cautious. So my bad, let's roll. But of course now couldn't help myself. So already we have all kinds of programming that we're actively thinking about if we can.
Want to give us some ideas of what you're thinking about?
Well, we you know, the cat is a little bit out of the bag because we had to file a public notice with this drive-in theater, and that was a thought that came up when I was thinking about what we could do within the given restrictions. I said, well, we could have people drive onto the property and never have their feet touch the ground. What could we do in those circumstances? Well, we could do pop-up Shakespeare, and my thought was, I'll build a stage on the fountain around the Rotary, and people will just drive in and they'll parallel park by the Rotary, and we'll perform for them there. I have lots of actors who live together. They cohabitate. And then I thought, well, so that's drive-in Shakespeare. Okay. And then what else do people like? Well, they like movies. Okay, well, so I called Julia Trumbull down in South County, you know, the great Doug Trumbull and Julia Trumbull. And she said, well, Kelly Vickery of the Berkshire International Film Festival is also thinking about doing drive-in movies. And I said, so I called Kelly and I said, hey, I have this building we could hang a movie screen on. Why don't you come over? And then we were kind of off to the races. It's not a done deal yet, of course. It still has to go before the zoning board and make sure, because we really want to respect our neighbors. But the sound would be broadcast into people's car radios. So, and again, they, you know, stay in your car, watch the movie, and see you later. Have a good night.
And what kind of films are you considering? What's the format in terms of?
Well, Kelly will be the curator, right? She's the film person. So we're thinking of Thursday through Sunday. Kelly will have an independent film on Thursday. We'll have maybe a Shakespeare-oriented or themed film or something. That's the beauty of Shakespeare, right? You can tie it into anything, right? I mean, and then again, an independent film on Saturday night and a very family-friendly film on Sunday nights. So, and maybe, hopefully what I'm hoping is to do some pop-up Shakespeare as a pre-show. A curtain raiser where we do some Shakespeare scenes for people, and then as the sun goes down, we'll roll the film. And you know, I have other ideas so that when people pull on the property, I have an idea where we do bedtime Shakespeare, where I read Shakespeare stories to people's kids as they fall asleep in the car, and then they can take them home and tuck them in. Or breakfast with Shakespeare, where people pull onto the property and I beam into their car radio and read them the morning paper and all the analogies with Shakespeare around it. So, yeah, we just can't help ourselves. You know, you're theater people. You gotta constantly be scratching the itch, and
it's more than that, though. I think this pandemic has forced people to really return to their inner resources and
Yeah.
think about other ways of communicating. I mean, for example, the Zoom. I know all of us were trepidatious at the beginning. Nobody wanted to go near it. And now it's become so commonplace. You practically just go on the computer every morning and have a chat with somebody that you care about, or, you know, your classes that you were taking. And I'm hoping, I guess I'm always the optimist, but I'm hoping that this is going to create some sort of a burgeoning of new ideas and creativity and new ways of approaching theater, all the arts, whatever, that we've never thought of before. And I think the younger people have embraced it far more than we, you know, than we could have imagined.
Yeah.
Because they're so comfortable with this medium.
Right. You know, years ago, probably 6 years ago, my brother suggested that my siblings and I do a Zoom meeting. And I went back into the office and I was like, yeah, I just got off a Zoom meeting with my family. Because normally I say to my family, you know, whatever you want to talk about, just make sure you keep me out of the loop. It's, you know, I just, whatever they need to decide. And everyone was like, Zoom, what's that? And I'm like, well, you video conference. And so now everyone is all, you know, Zoom centric. And it can be a very useful tool. I think I'm eager for the time when we can do both, when we can use Zoom at will, but also have the ability to be in each other's presence.
But just one more thing, I just want to say, the way you're talking about using your property, has that opened up your mind to new venues on the entire property after this whole problem is over? Because I love the idea of using the fountain, of doing other things there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to do kind of Shakespeare by promenade, right? Where people walk around and they discover different scenes from Midsummer Night's Dream actually in the woods. You know, you go so that we have the advantage of having 32 acres and there are lots of different, I mean, we have a mini Globe Theater on the property. We have the Roman Garden Theater. We have the Rose Footprint Theater. And I'm always thinking about other theaters that we can create, because I ran a site-specific itinerant theater in Boston with Actors Shakespeare Project. And I would go into empty warehouses and we would often build a theater just to do a show. Or I would bang on a landlord's door and say, you want to rent us your huge 2,000 square foot space here, and we want to do a show. And they'd be like, sure, yeah, have at it. And so that's kind of where I come from, you know.
Good.
So let's go on to another aspect. There are a lot of programs at Shakespeare and Company that people may have heard of but don't know about. What I'm looking at in particular is interest to me, for a reason to be determined, is Shakespeare in the Courts.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about all that? I think it's a terrific, terrific idea.
Yeah. Shakespeare in the Courts was spearheaded by our Director of Education, Kevin Coleman. It's, you know, he likes to say that, you know, that when oftentimes when they appear, if they've, you know, committed a transgression, he gives them the choice either to, you know, spend some time kind of incarcerated or spend some time doing Shakespeare. And it's oftentimes a difficult decision for them. But once they get in the room, especially with Kevin, who is, you know, so great on having them access where they're coming from and who they are and how it relates to Shakespeare. And when they realize how much that language resonates for them, it's really powerful in terms of, you know, rebuilding their self-confidence, their sense of interaction, focusing on how they can get traction to move forward in a positive way in their lives. And that is, it's been enormously beneficial for those kids who've experienced it. And so we're very proud of that program.
Do you know, have any of those kids gone on to do more theater activity?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we at Actors Shakespeare Project, we had a similar program with Department of Youth Services, and I can speak more directly to it there because I'm only just back here. But yeah, we brought those kids on an ongoing basis, and they would help out in all elements of the theater, backstage, on stage, and it was very fruitful an endeavor as it is here. So, yeah.
Well, you know, we have a little anecdote about your Shakespeare in the school programs, because one time we were driving up north, the car broke down. It turned out we were out of gas. All right, but never mind that. And the tow truck operator, who was a young man in his 20s, picked us up, and we said, well, we're late for a theater meeting. With that, he turns to us and burst into a soliloquy from one of the Henrys and entertained us all the way back to Great Barrington. And I said, wow, obviously this is working, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't the court thing. It was,
you know, but it was just an amazing, that you obviously are doing your work in the schools.
Yeah. And they refer to us, they don't refer to us as, they drop the "and" company. Like if I go into a gas station, they'll be like, hey, Shakespeare.
You think they're confusing you with somebody?
Riot.
Yeah.
Okay, so some more on the outreach stuff. I'm not sure how many people know about this, but the Northeast Regional Tour, where you send shows out.
Yeah. It was my first experience with the company. In 1989, I came to Shakespeare and Company. I had just taken the workshop. I had met Tina in Boston, and we did something, a Primo Levi play called Survival in Auschwitz. And then, you know, I took this workshop, and they cast me in the tour. And it is, it's boot camp for young actors. There's no question. It is a grueling 17-week tour, you know. You know, I learned an expression on that tour that if you can't find the jerk on the tour, it's probably you, you know. You're out on tour and you're like, you know, everyone is so great. I just get along with everyone so well. But the young actors now, they've got it down to a system, and they stay so positive. They go all the way over, you know, all up and down the East Coast for 17 weeks. And this year they started out with Comedy of Errors and Macbeth. And they're just, you know, they really cut their teeth. They do everything. You know, we used to have, you know, we used to pull up to a school at 8:30 in the morning and have a set up in 12.5 minutes. And then they'd roll the kids in at 8:45, and then we were off to the races, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. We did Julius Caesar. The show that I did all those many years ago was Julius Caesar, and Caesar would always open one eye right as he was about to be assassinated and say, "Good morning."
Oh, Peter, yeah.
And one more thing in conjunction with that, which people probably know, is the theater festival, the Shakespeare Theater Festival, that brings the shows in.
Yeah, the Fall Festival of Shakespeare. And
yeah.
that's still on our calendar for this year. We're holding a good thought that we'll be able to do it. But that is the most ribald, robust, boisterous event, non-competitive, over-the-top event. We direct these shows in 10 high schools in the region, and then the weekend before Thanksgiving, bring them all to our campus and our theater here and do them back to back to back. And you've never seen such vocal mutual support from competing schools for the other kids who are up on the stage. They become the groundlings, but in a very beneficial way. There are no vegetables thrown, you know. So,
That's great. So, you know, now I'm going to bring us back to, obviously, Shakespeare, the reason why we're all here. But I'm sure that the audience would like to know a little bit about Shakespeare's response to the plague during his time. I think it's just so appropriate that we're starting off with you, and that it's Shakespeare, and that he had to undergo a great many changes in his own lifetime. But yet
Yeah.
you don't see that he doesn't write any one play about plague. I mean, he doesn't do any pity parties about the plague. It's just the natural part of their lives. So maybe do you want to address that a little bit? I'm sure you had lots of conversations.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there were three kind of major plagues on his calendar. One was in 1593, another in 1604, and another in 1606. And the first one in 1593, he actually wrote kind of the epic poem Venus and Adonis, and it was a huge hit. And I think if the plague had continued, he may have given second thought to going back into playwriting, but he really missed his compatriots in the theater, and so he went back to playwriting after that. But it sold so well that he had another avenue of expression with that poem. And then subsequently, people say, well, he wrote Lear during one of the latter plagues.
Yeah.
And so there was this tamping down of his creative energy that was then subsequently released. Now, how much of it was, fomented while he couldn't, go outside or some such thing? It's hard to tell exactly what the restrictions would have been. Obviously, they were, they were governmental orders to self-isolate, but they had it. They had a very interesting kind of level on which you could begin operations. Of course, there were about 30,000 people who died in London during the plague of 1604, and they said that if there were fewer than 30,000 people a week dying of the plague, then you could open your theater doors. Now that feels like an arbitrary number to me, but sometimes they would, it'd inch up, and I guess they think, well, what's 33, and that's what's so heartbreaking about so much of this, is that we lean into the numbers of all of this, and that's why I so appreciated that front page of the New York Times, where they had those little micro bios of people who had names, they had lives, they had families, they had friends. And that's, I think, what we have to remember. And I think that's what Shakespeare was particularly attuned to, and what he's credited with is that overwhelming sense of empathy. And that's what we have to perpetuate, is that is not to get lost in all the data and the analysis of this on a numbers level, but this is really about human lives. So fortunately, we had Shakespeare. I mean, he went on to write some of his best stuff after all this stuff. So we're really grateful for that.
Sensitivity, we don't know how it affected him. Maybe he learned a lesson himself. I know his landlady died, which I thought was interesting, but so he did have brushes with it. And he also had to run back to home, I guess, to hide out for a while.
Right, yeah. I played Mercutio at the Denver Center, and years ago, gosh, it's 25 years ago now. But one of the lines you really lean into is that last line of Mercutio. It's like, what is the biggest curse you can yell at someone? A plague on your houses. Right? And as he's getting dragged off, the last thing we hear him say is your houses, just for emphasis. I plague on your houses, and then your houses. So it's fascinating. It's definitely pervasive in its presence. And maybe by not drawing direct attention to it, he actually gives it more weight, because it's lurking there. It's always there in the background.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, well, I know I'll never hear that line again and think nothing of it, right? I mean, if anything, it has sensitized us much more than we ever were in the past as to his many lines in his plays.
Yeah.
And the fact that, of course, in his time period, they would have been stepping over bodies. There would have been mass graves. I mean, we're horrified. I can't imagine what they experienced even if they survive.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think that the streets were so narrow, the gutters were open sewers, you know, that they were much closer. It was a very visceral experience living back then. So,
And, you know, for us, people are just disappearing. We don't see them. They're gone. But for them, that would not have been the case. So, yeah, it's changed our perceptions on many levels.
The Monty Python, the Holy Grail thing.
Yeah, right.
Bring out your dead, bring out your dead.
right.
Now,
Yeah, at the time. One more context. We're all part of the theater community up here. Do you ever get time to go to other theaters, or when people from other theaters come to you, do you talk with them, converse?
Yeah, we actually, you know, it's funny because we've been all on Zoom recently as cohorts, you know, talking about all the different issues and where we're going. You know, I've had more conversations with Julie Boyd on Zoom than we ever had the opportunity to before because of our schedules and how they lined up. You know, this would have been my 4th season back here. And I was really determined to make more time to go to other theaters, right? But by the time you finish your curtain speech, welcoming your own audience, you know, it becomes a little, then you become that guy, right? The late seater who kind of tries to sneak into a performance elsewhere. I really wish I had time to see absolutely everything because there's so much quality art going on up here. You know, I was struck by, in recent conversations, talking to our stakeholders and our patrons, is a lot of folks come to the Berkshires for the culture.
Yeah.
And that may seem obvious, but it really struck me when they were saying, yeah, no, we're going to stay in Florida this year, or we're going to stay in New York, or we're going to stay in Boston. I was like, really? It's the lilacs are out. You know, it's beautiful out here. And they're like, yeah, no, it's really for the culture that we come to the Berkshires.
well, that's
And
our
that
industry.
That's
right?
our major industry.
That's our major industry, I would say.
It is, and I've always said it, but I really heard it when they said, no, we're not coming. You know, we're just not coming.
Wow.
So I think that speaks to the power of it. And we always assumed that it was kind of went hand in hand with the environment, but it really is a driving force of this area.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So speaking of your curtain speech, we love the way you assist your daughter.
I know, unbelievable. You know, she there's one sentence she doesn't understand. Don't touch the props. You know?
So do a lot of theater goers. I mean,
yeah. No, she's a big help, and I'm only out there to make sure that we keep things short. You know.
So when do you foresee her being cast in a play?
Well, she did Riotous Youth, one of our summer youth programs, and we're very sad not to be able to have those collect on the property this year. But you know, she's written 2 plays and had them produced here. She's a director. She's certainly, I mean, I'm at her beck and call all day long now. You know, people say, "How's life?" I'm like, it's fine. Sadie gets to boss me around all day long and watch videos, like, you know. But she, you know, she is the daughter of 2 actors, Tamara Hickey and myself. And so she may be a producer. She may be a director. That's kind of where her mind goes, or a writer. She's always making up stories. So I'm not going to try to pigeonhole her, you know. I mean, you know, it's really funny how it gets passed down, as I'm sure you're aware, to the next generation. You know, when I finally had to have a very serious chat with my dad when I told him that I was going to go into the theater seriously. And I said, you know, I've decided, I made up my mind. I'm going to pursue acting. I'm going to be an actor. And he paused and he said, well, your grandfather would be very proud of you. You know, like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna leave it at that.
That's a fabulous line. I love that.
I'm going to take that as approbation, right?
Talk about equivocation. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. But getting back to what you were saying about the power of theater in the Berkshires, we come away time and time again. I mean, not only are there main stage productions now, but second stage, outdoor stage. The whole place is just alive with creativity.
The small theaters that surround the biggies.
The small
Yeah.
theaters that are going, as that have sprung up. We could do, as you said, there's not enough time in the day for theater here. Between, there's New York, there's Massachusetts, Connecticut. We can't get up to Vermont because we have animals, but the place is just hopping.
Yeah.
And great quality and very innovative, scope. It's just something, you're not seeing something that's just matter of fact every day. It's very, very, some of it's so edgy. It might have come off on a small off-Broadway production and it's here.
Yeah, that's right.
Motivated to go back to New York as much as we used to. It's sort of like, ho-hum, we'll just give it a season and we'll see something wonderful up here.
Yeah, when I produced my first summer here, there was a test that I had to run because I put up titles that had been done in New York. They were, either Tony Award or nominated titles or Pulitzer Prize winning titles. And I thought, well, here's a risk. People will say, ho hum, I saw that in New York. And, I don't need to see it here. What I was struck by was two things. One, people would either say, I missed this in New York. Thanks for doing it up here. Or two, I did see it in New York and I appreciated seeing your company do it. Having your company, your actors speak those words and be in those situations. It gave them a whole new insight into the play itself. So I've been really gratified. It hasn't made me shy away from doing titles that have been done in New York.
I also think that you afford an intimacy that's not always available in New York.
That's
so
right.
A play that you are really immediately involved with here on a smaller scale is so much more moving on many levels.
Well, the first thing I did when I got here was close down all the theaters to a much more intimate setting. The Packer Playhouse, I brought the audience in much closer. The Bernstein Theater, I took away one of the VOMs and brought that side of the house in. The Roman Garden Theater, even though it's outside, is a very intimate space. I like to say it's our hedge against Netflix because that's all we have with live theater is that visceral kind of vibration that you get by being in the presence of the actors who are having that experience.
Right.
The intimacy.
Yeah. And so that I feel has paid off, and I'm gratified for that. Yeah.
So,
we'd like to ask you a lot more questions, but we're moving on to almost an hour. So,
is there anything you would like to say to those folks who are watching us or listening to us?
Yeah, I guess I think right now we're at a critical crossroads in the world right now, and people have often said, what is the function of theater in the world? Well, I used to say until recently, that we here at Shakespeare and Company do things in reflection of the world, not in reaction to. Because by the time you form a season, if you form a season in reaction to current events, that's 8 months out. And so the events will have changed. And we see how quickly things change here now. But I think it's important for people to understand that theater isn't just a diversion. It really is about the language and those connections, and that there's a reason it survived since the Greeks. We're not trying to get all the attention, but we do want a corner of the world that is nourishing for people, that is a reinforcement for people, and really is about humanity. And that's what we're doing. And we're going to be back. We feel really confident about coming back strong on the other side of this pandemic. But right now, we're putting our minds to all the turbulence and upset, it's really important for us all to remember that Black lives matter, and not to get lost in so much of the back and forth. And just the very simple message is that, we're all here to share this world, and we have to do that with honor. And so that's what we come back to time and time again when we create theater. You're theater makers, I'm a theater maker, and we're here to tell the stories, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And I'm really excited to come back and do it live. We'll keep doing stuff online. Don't worry. We have Tina's Talks, which is the webinar that's been created, where Tina Packer, our founding artistic director, talks about Shakespeare through so many different viewpoints: the personal, the philosophical, the psychological, the physical. It's a fascinating ongoing webinar. People can check our website at shakespeare.org. And next Tuesday, I'll be talking with Reggie Life, the director of Top Dog Underdog from last summer, and Bryce Michael Wood. And I renamed the title of the discussion to, making theater in a world torn apart, because I think we have a responsibility to carry on and to continue to stay on narrative, stay on task, keep speaking, because sometimes you find yourself, like kind of hibernating, physically hibernating. You want to kind of close in, but I think we have a responsibility to stay in dialogue with each other, because words, people have said to me recently, okay, so, you've said a lot, what are you going to do? And I'm like, in good time, we're playing this, that we're taking the long view on this, and we're at it day after day. But speaking in its way is action. We all have to stay in dialogue, and that is an action in its way. To exchange the words, and that's what we find important here. So.
Well, I feel the same way you do. I think it's going to come roaring back. It did in Shakespeare's time, 30,000, they kept going. And I feel the same way, that we've been isolated for so long that people are hungry for dialogue and theater and intimacy. And I do believe it's going to be better than ever.
Yeah, so, I don't go to the theater wondering if I'm going to get the measles or not. Eventually there'll be a vaccine, and then we'll all get inoculated, and then we'll come back. And the only issue we have is going to be all the prolonged hugs. You know what I mean? Because we're all going to want to hug each other so much, and be like, okay, take it easy. Or as my brother used to say, when I would give him a hug, he'd be like, whoa, what's with all the hugs?
Okay, so we've been using a lot of time.
And having a great time.
And Megan says that there are some questions that people would like to ask.
Okay.
So take it away, Megan.
Thank
Allyn,
you. This has been a most marvelous conversation, and we really appreciate it. I personally have really enjoyed listening to it. And we have a number of comments, and I encourage people to write more in, either in chat or Q&A. And a first very simple one from Naomi Spatz is, what time is your webinar on Tuesday? It says with Reggie.
That's at 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 9th.
4 p.m. at Tuesday the 9th.
4 p.m.
Okay, great. And we have a question from Ben Lipson. How do you generate a revenue stream? And I assume he's talking about during this pandemic and so forth.
Right. Well, we were able to stay open because we were fortunate to apply early and aggressively for the PPP loan. So that is going to help us.
And that's the payroll protection program?
Yeah, the payroll protection plan. That's right. And then, and we have had some very generous donations come in from people who have, so we're focusing on the contributed income and, and generating all kinds of ideas about how to monetize things going forward. We're also keeping our costs down, right? So there's that, we're offsetting it in that way. But yeah, we're looking towards the future and saving it. We're creating that rainy day fund. So we welcome all donations because we will put them to good use in their time. So.
Right, and it'll help you then to roar back when it's
That's
time.
right. Yeah.
Yes. And what do you see other theater companies doing around the country that really interests you, that are, you know, out of the box ideas?
Oh gosh,
I assume everyone's borrowing from each other.
yeah. Well, they're as Shakespeare can prove, there's no such thing as an original thought. Everything is derivative, yeah, there's just so much wonderful online programming happening and live streaming, you know, you almost can't keep up. You have to put them on your calendar because otherwise they go by. And so much of the stuff coming out of the Globe Theater, coming out of all the small theaters that are, you know, in their intrepid way, kind of leaning into the Zoom camera and performing in a very intimate setting. Our online content has been about taking past performances and doing them in an intimate way for people, one-on-one, in the Zoom format, if you will. So.
Yes, so much online. So there's a message from Carol Fisher, and she wanted to congratulate you, Allyn, for your heartfelt email that was recently sent out to the Shakespeare and Company community about the protesters.
Thank you. Yeah, it's you know, it's a very challenging time. I think we, you know, that is our right as people of the world and as Americans to stand up and be heard. We are used as actors, as theater people, we're used to being heard, but I applaud those people who are also being heard in a peaceful way and being vocal about what they're upset about. And I think it's an important part of our democracy to continue with that.
Absolutely. And I remember Tina Packers a couple of years ago started doing a training for, I would say, lay people on public speaking, so that they can, if they wanted to be civically active, they could be more skilled in it, which I thought was a really wonderful thing to do. Actually, I took the workshop myself.
Oh, great. I thought I saw you there. Yeah.
So we also have a message from Lael Locke. She says, thank you to Allyn for the Fall Festival. Chatham was the first school in New York to participate, and it has been glorious to see so many of our kids blossom through it. In fact, Lydia Barnett Mulligan, after participating here in town, joined Shakespeare and Company for a time.
Yeah, Lydia is also a member of my company in Boston, an Actors Shakespeare project. She's just fantastic. You know, the thing about, you talk about tying together protests and being vocal and the Fall Festival, that's one of the beauties of the Fall Festival, is it gives a lot of these young kids the confidence to stand up and be heard and to speak from the heart and honestly and forthrightedly, and that's been one of the great benefits of the Fall Festival.
I'm sure there's a lot of Shakespeare Fall Festival kids out in the protests that have been happening locally.
Yeah, they're the ones you can really hear.
Yeah, right. They can So we have a note from Barbara Waldinger. As I mentioned, Ollie has a play reading shared interest group that's led by Naomi and Nancy, Barbara, and Carol. And she writes, our playwriting shared interest group chooses plays to read and discuss that will be performed on Berkshire stages, which has kind of gone up in the air this year. But we are thinking of the play Betrayal for our next discussion. Do you plan to produce it next season?
That's our plan. Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, it's a real gem. And actually, you know, Reggie was slated to direct it, and David Joseph and Elizabeth Aspinleader were cast in it. So yeah, we hadn't done it for many years here. I actually did it with Corinna May in 1997 myself over at the Mount. We did 184 performances of that show. So
wow.
yeah, we ran it from May through October, but we figure 23 years, we can bring it back. So, long
Absolutely.
enough.
All right. So it's a go for that to be the next iteration.
Yeah.
In addition to the play, I think there were, it's not really one, I think there were 2 films on betrayal. Is that correct?
I only know of one with
Ben Kingsley.
Ben Kingsley and Jeremy Irons.
Oh.
That's the only one I know. Yeah.
So we have a message also from Barbara Gold. She says, as a furloughed longtime volunteer at Shakespeare and Company, these Zoom programs keep me in touch. Thank you, Allyn.
Well, thank you, Barbara, for all you do. My gosh, what a stalwart. Amazing. We wouldn't, the volunteers are really, the lesser known lifeblood of this organization. Over 200 volunteers, and they're so committed that they really set an example for everyone else who comes on the property and works with us. So.
Absolutely, and here at Ollie also we are very much volunteer driven. She also writes, I'm also an old friend of Gloria and Macey, and was delighted to see and hear them this morning. So, and Nancy Vale actually wrote something, but would you like to speak it, Nancy?
Well, I really I feel like I've been in mourning for the theater for quite some time now. Very saddened that we don't have it, but I feel so encouraged by your optimism, and you too, Gloria and Macey, because your outlook, as you said, is a long view. And I think I have to get myself into that long view and say, yes, it will be back. And there will be much, much more to come and look forward to. When Naomi and I said, well, I guess we won't be doing our course this summer because there's nothing to see. And we both said, yeah, right. It's sad. What? And then we thought, well, wait a minute. We got to hear it. We heard about Zoom. We talked some more, and we came up with this idea that people would love to hear from our people, our theater creative people, in their own persona, so to speak, about what are they going to do during this pandemic? How are they going to get through it? I mean, we can sit around and, watch 100 movies. It's just not the same. And you pointed that out, Allyn, so beautifully. Theater, live theater is live theater. Yeah. And I don't want to make a speech here, but I am making a speech because I just feel so happy that you've given me something to really look forward to.
Great.
In the days to come. So that's exciting. Thank you for that.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Macey and Gloria and Allyn.
Yes.
Your generosity in spending time. I know, Allyn, you said you've been on Zoom for so long and everything as you've been trying to put your theater down and up. But I also wanted to thank Megan, because when Nancy and I decided, well, if the course is about the season, we have no season, what do we do? And Megan said, you got to do something. You got to do something.
That's right.
You should have the artistic directors talk about what they're not doing. And I said, that's great. Talk about, I said, there's one sentence, we're closing down because of the virus. Now what do we do? And I'll tell you, until this very moment, I was very anxious about how this would work. Because how it would be interesting and things. And I want to thank the 3 of you are just wonderful. I've been fascinated by the conversation. I thank Macey and Gloria for wonderful questions and wonderful contributions. And Allyn, you're a knockout. What can I say?
Thanks, Naomi. I'm just glad that you and I have the same refrigerator.
You learn so much more about people's homes now on Zoom.
That's right.
See what their backdrop is. You said no clues for me today. I've got BCC in the background.
Well, I'll share this with you. This is, of course, there's Tam. I keep that close by. That's trying to keep it. This right here, my mother was an artist, and this is one of her prints. She did 4 seasons of these. This is, you can tell, winter, but this is a monoprint, and So I keep her close at hand. You know, I make sure that's my mother watching over me. You know, making sure that I'm good to people. You know.
That's lovely, because we have the similar thing. Stephen's mother was a painter, and normally I'm sitting on the couch and having just to show off her 2 paintings behind me. But today I thought I better sort of sit up and threw some flowers, because the last time I was on, Steve was doing the course on Euripides for Allyn, and I got on Zoom, and there's Euripides over my head, and people say, "Who is that? Who is that?"
Right.
But I'm glad you like the refrigerator. Good for refrigerator, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions for Allyn, and I encourage the folks who are online to keep sending their questions via chat or Q&A. And one is that Shakespeare and Company traditionally has a 4th of July reading, and I was wondering if you're planning to do that socially distanced or virtually this year.
Well, of course, you know, we wouldn't be able to do it socially distancing as of now because of the gathering limit, which is still set at 10, right? So where the plans on what to do with the 4th of July event are still in formation. We're not ruling out any, you know, surprising programming around it, but, you know, it is great to mark the occasion. And that's, we hope to do that in some fashion.
Great, thank you. And I also, you just moved a poster about your actor training, and I was wondering if you are planning to do any of that online until it is.
Yeah, well, right now, yeah, we do have an online course that we've initiated, and it's been so successful that we'll do more. If people go to shakespeare.org and to the training department, they can see how to sign up. And of course, Tina's talks webinar is, you know, it's a wealth of information that people can get from hearing her speak about Shakespeare's works. And
how did that go yesterday?
Really well, really well.
Oh,
so yeah, so we kind of dipped the toe into the water on the webinar training, because so many of our faculty have been teaching online for so long, and so we had to navigate the challenges of transferring over to virtual learning. We wanted it to be satisfying for people.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's always a big difference between the multitude of programming you can watch on YouTube, which is, you know, not live and not interactive, and then the ability to have live interactive classes and conversations like we're doing now, like you're going to do with Reggie and so forth. And I think when people can participate and they know that they're in the moment with everyone, that Zoom does, and other types of video conferencing does allow that. And that's a more substantial experience than sort of a passive one-way viewing. Although that's nice too, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I think that's really one of the benefits of using video conferencing.
Yeah.
By the way, Allyn, are you planning to watch the National Theatre's Coriolanus? You did Coriolanus last year, didn't you?
Yeah, we did a staged reading of it. Yeah, I will be watching that. It was a fascinating play to explore. I was really not all that familiar with it, so it was wonderful to delve into that.
I think they're also, the Red Bull is also, I mean, I think 2 Coriolanuses are going up right now on.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm streamed out.
So we have some more questions on chat from, let's see, Barbara Waldinger again. Could pop-up Shakespeare scenes be done on Zoom?
Yeah, that especially with our actors who have been cohabitating already. We have little clusters of company members who were, you know, who've been in quarantine together for a long time. And so I've been encouraging them to, you know, think about what material they'd like to work on, because if they don't come up with something, I'm going to propose something very soon. So yeah, that of course is an option. We've kind of moved beyond the monologue stage now. We have to do something that is more active and a little broader than that. We don't have a lot of archival material just to roll out. We're not like the National Theater where they had all that. Those are multi-million-dollar productions that they put up, and they're able to roll those out. And, you know, for us, all of our stage productions, because we put emphasis on them being live, we're really just, for archival purposes, filmed with one camera from the back of the house. It's not that satisfying.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, isn't there there's a legal and financial issues with filming a production and then showing it, because
Absolutely, yeah.
that's over my head.
It's much more cost prohibitive than you would think, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so it seems simple, but not always. So Chris Gadet writes, with the benefit of this protracted downtime and the opportunity to reflect without the pressure of day-to-day activities, what could change in Shakespeare and Company when the pandemic ends?
It's a very good question. I think every environment shifts. Obviously, you know, just in terms of relationships, we are going to be in a new environment on the other side of this. So everything will be seen through the viewfinder of recent occurrences, and also we will have the experience of this pandemic in our bones as well. And so we are, on some level, we will have shifted on a cellular level. So a lot of discussion will ensue about where do we go from here? What do we do now? Rather than, you know, just sloughing off these experiences as something that we want to forget. We have to integrate them into our work, into how we speak, how we relate to each other, how we relate to the audience. And we'll have that knowledge inherent. It'll be in our bones, and we'll incorporate all of that.
And these days, we just don't know what things are going to look like on the other side.
That's right. That's right.
Our Ollie board president calls this the year of experiments.
Yep.
Because we're just trying new things and figuring out what can work given the constraints that we face. So Nancy Vale had another question. Nancy, you have a TV or radio on in the background?
I have people. Can you? But I'm plugged.
Yeah.
But I've got the my earplugs.
I'll mute you and
Okay.
read it. So Nancy wrote, what are, and this is a question I think for Macey and Gloria, what are our critics doing in terms of theater and critiquing right now?
Well,
What are our critics doing in terms of theater and critiquing right now?
nothing. I mean, we had this conversation, you know, we were the founders. Larry Murray came up with the idea, or now deceased, and we are the founding members of the
Berkshire Theatre Critics Association.
And so we've been having Zoom meetings to discuss
What to do?
the future, because in November we were supposed to be giving, this would be our 4th year, be giving awards to productions and directors and actors. Fifth year, sorry, our 5th year. And yeah, we're just stymied. I mean, about how to proceed. I mean, obviously we can't do anything as a body, and there's nothing to really discuss. And there have been a few little things that have popped up, and some things that were done before the closure.
We still have a reservation for the space, the church in Pittsfield. So we're holding on to that date if we can come up with something to bring the community together at some point.
You know, if some sort of miraculous thing happens, maybe we will have a celebration. Right now, we're having a meeting actually on Tuesday. I mean, we're still talking to we're still talking to each other. We're mulling ideas, and I guess we're like everyone else. We're just living day by day and watching for a break. Yeah, I know.
And right now, Berkshire Theatre Group and Barrington Stage Company are planning on, and Berkshire Opera Festival are planning to do some sort of performances.
Right.
You know,
But then
knock on wood, fingers crossed, etc.
Right. But that in context with how can we have some sort of award ceremony when the rest of the Berkshires is silenced? I mean, it's, you know, so there are a lot of things to
And
consider.
minimal numbers of production.
Yeah, with a minimal number of productions. So,
Absolutely.
You remind me of some years ago, we were doing the course for advertising the season. But when I thought, well, we should also have the critics talk, and I was in a conversation with Larry, and
oh,
he encouraged me on that, and he said he would be on it. He said they were forming this thing, and he said, but I'm really not well. I don't know if I can participate. And we had not ever met in person. And he sounded so wonderful. I said to him, look, up till the very day we have this, you can either come or not come. And then I think, unfortunately, he died like 2 weeks before. But it was very encouraging, and he seemed to be a wonderful character.
yeah, and he wanted the Berkshires to take their rightful place. He wanted to draw attention to the theater, that's the quality and the extent that theater is performed here. And this was his idea, that we should have our own awards ceremony. We should honor each other. We should encourage cooperation among the different theater companies and all of the artists who work here, and some of them do move around to different theater companies, that this is a huge entity that has to be honored.
And Allyn, you probably know, Larry was in Boston, and he created all kinds of organizations and programs, and he was one of the driving forces behind the Elliot Norton Awards.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, which you won.
He was an extraordinary individual.
Yeah,
Yes, he was. Yes. We have a question from Louise Frankenberg. She asks, have you heard of any new play yet with a COVID-19 theme?
Yes, it's called Richard III. No, but I know they're gonna. I'm just waiting for them to hit my inbox. Yeah,
Haven't come yet?
yeah. Again, it's a question of how many COVID plays we'll want to do on the other side of this, you know, you know, there've been several ideas about how we approach things artistically on the other side, but I know we'll be reading them if they're sent to us. We'll be reading them.
Wonderful.
I've heard of at least one play. I think it's a series of monologues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I just finished Hilary Mantel's third book on Cromwell, and King Henry did not, if anyone was sick, they could not come to court. And of course, they avoided, when he was on tour or anything, avoided any place that had the plague was a very strong, but any kind of disease. So, you know, the history of plagues, maybe we should do Camus as well, La Peste.
Yeah.
I've heard of people who couldn't finish Hilary Mantel's third book because there were too many plague references. It was just too much for them, especially in the early days.
You're too busy to read that. You're too busy to read. I don't know how you would have.
I haven't even tried. No, I've read the first one and half of the second one. We have another question from Jeannie Woods. She says, you mentioned having pods of actors who can work together. Is it possible to direct actors using Zoom? What are the pros and cons?
Well, it is possible. The cons is when the actors step out of view of the camera and say to each other, I'm not going to do that. What he just said, I'm not that, you know, forget that.
Forget to mute?
It's like, yeah, it's completely dangerous territory for a director. You know, we used to say, one of my teachers at BU said, you know, if you learn nothing, just learn to be director proof when you go to New York, you know. He said, and I'm dating myself, he said, stand by a typewriter, and as the pages come out of the typewriter, you know, speak them, you know. And he said that, and make sure you're director proof. Now, I don't know what that means, and as a director, I don't encourage anyone to be director proof.
And so have you done any directing via Zoom?
No, but I have thought about it, and I think that may be what we're up against, right? It's
Time will tell.
It'll have its benefits and of course its challenges.
Absolutely.
You know, apropos of nothing and everything, I remember as a child, my mother spoke Yiddish, but I didn't. She also spoke English, but Yiddish was the default language, you know, in front of the children. And one day she said something to me, "Achaliera," and look, I'm looking at her and I said, "What does that mean?" And she thought for a moment and she said, "A cholera on you." And
Oh,
apparently this was, you know, kind of, you forget what it all means, and we both started to giggle. And because, you know, there are things that are curses in different languages and you don't really think of the words anymore. And she didn't think of the words anymore, but apparently that was part of the the cursing tradition of the Eastern European Jews. So maybe they knew Henry.
So we just had somebody ask, they said, and I quote, "Will this wonderful session be available to watch later?" And of course I said yes. As we said at the beginning, this is being recorded. And if anybody wants a copy, they can just email the Ollie office and we'll be happy to send you a link. And we have also, we'll also be sharing the link with the different theater companies who will share them as they wish online and so forth. So we are happy that we can share this very lively and fascinating conversation with others, because communication in these times is so important. And I have one other question or comment here from Ben Lipson. He says, "Comment on watching recorded performance versus being in live theater."
Yeah, I'm afraid there's no comparison. You know, if you want theater, I mean, I saw a Rory Kinnear's Hamlet beamed from the National years ago at the Coolidge Corner Theater in Brookline. And, what?
Hi.
You remember it? That was a 6-camera streamed performance. It was an amazing performance, and I still was wishing I could have seen it in person.
right.
House.
It's just, I mean, we have seen NT live performances, and they're satisfying on one level, but on another, they just are empty. You don't leave with that same visceral, you know.
The lack of the intimacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are all looking forward to the day when we can be back in the theater with
Yes.
the company and so many other theater companies here. I'm going to sign off now, and Nancy and Naomi will send us off and also remind us of who will be joining us next week. So thank you all so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Macey, Gloria. You're just wonderful. You set a very high bar, but do join us again next week, because I hope they all watch and are brilliant like you are. Thank you so much.
Well, I just want to say that I think we have a new expression now that everybody is thinking inside of the box, and wonderful things are coming out of it. And thank you for sharing your time, all three of you. We enjoyed having you so much.
We loved it. It was wonderful.
We had a good time.
Yeah.
Great to see you, Macey and Gloria. Take care.
Thank you.
Nancy,
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye now.
Okay.
Good, very good. I'm surprised how good it was.